Julian Menzel was born on March 25, 1919. He was drafted into the military in June of 1942. He reached the position of first lieutenant while serving in the U.S. Air Force in China. Menzel remembers his first day in the service.
Well, the first day was the day they said we to meet uptown, wait for the train to pick us up. So, got on the train and sit down, and we got as far as Springfield on the train. Another fellow got in, sit down next to me. His name was Earl Rutherford, and he rode along. We were both sat there and talked all the time. And we were both assigned to the barracks.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up, we were both assigned to bunks in the second floor of the barracks next to each other. We buddied up a lot of most of the time there. And of course we did a lot of visiting, we talked to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd go by the office. There were big signs up there, join the Air Force. They paid, $75 a month.
Mm-hmm.
I said, Earl, why don't we join the Air Force and see what they got for us? And he didn't like the field artillery either, and I didn't either. So we decided we'd sign up for the Air Force. That's how we got in.
Upon completing pilot training, Menzel was shipped to Columbia, South Carolina, where he graduated. From there, Menzel was sent to Florida, where he was to be shipped to Natal, after stopping overnight in Haiti. Menzel then stopped at Ascension Island for fuel on his way to Africa. Menzel and the rest of his squadron stayed in the camel barns in Khartoum, Africa. After Khartoum, they traveled to Karachi, India, and then to Bombay, then Bangalore, and finally to Kunming, China. Menzel tells about one of his most memorable missions.
On this one mission, I never will forget it. I mean, that was scary as far as I was concerned. They came in. They got a hold of me one day and said, "You're going to have a mission tomorrow morning."
At the meeting, Menzel was told he was going to meet a B-24 to bomb a ship.
And the next morning, bright and early, it got us up, walked outside, and the fog was so bad you couldn't see the airplanes out there at all. In fact, you couldn't hardly see anything. I got up to 9,000 something, and there broke out in between the clouds, and I looked up and I could see the 24 up there way above waiting for us.
Mm-hmm.
And climbed up to 10,000 feet, and there he was. He's waiting. So both of us, he got on one side and I got on the other, and we flew out the China Seas and flew for quite some time and got out there in the sea, and the pilot pointed, "That's it, go get it."
Menzel and the other planes bombed the ship and completed their mission. They were told to go to another airfield because of the fog, then disaster struck.
We headed toward the field, the fighter field, and looked down at the gas gauge, and when we got almost there, gas gauge, see there's, what was it, 4 tanks, wing tanks. You turn it different, wasn't any gas in them. I said to the engineer, check that once and see if that's what you get.
Mm-hmm.
And he checked it, and he said, we're out of gas. And we hadn't landed yet. We had about a half hour to go yet. And there is what bothered me. You look at the ground, there's nothing there to put an airplane down on,
Mm-hmm.
except big rocks, Some of them are as big as this house, but no gasoline. And boy, that shook me. And I told everybody on the plane to get their parachute fastened on and buckled up real tight, open the hatches, just in case, and if the engine sputtered a couple times, get out.
Although low on fuel, Menzel was able to bring his men back safely. In between missions, he did have leisure time. During his leisure time, Menzel's friend drew a picture of him that represented what his friend thought of bombers.
This is what my friend, he and I used to go out and drinking beer, you know, in California. We would go out and do a lot of boozing. And when we got back to Columbia, South Carolina, why, he came over to the barracks one day and wondered where I was located. And so he sat down on the bunk, you know, my bunk there, and drew this picture of me, and he hung it up on the wall, and he was gone. Let's see, where did he go? He went to Europe, I think, as a pilot. Didn't hear any more from him, but he's the one that drew that picture, and of what he thought we were like. So that's where it came from. And right now I can't think of what his name was, but we used to have a lot of fun together, going out.
He explains about his unit's insignia.
Right. And this was the insignia. You see it? Insignia for the squadron. The jig squadron. They had somebody, I don't know who did it, but they put the insignia on a plane of their plane, you know, and everybody copied it off there, and that's where this one ended up. One of the copies off a different plane, and they had that kind of stuff, and it was called the jigs.
The insignia was worn by members of Menzel's squadron, one of whom was Benny Kelly, a friend from the States who was killed during a mission.
You know, Benny Kelly got. I flew with several times with Benny. Well, I knew him in the States, in Columbia, South Carolina. I knew him, he and his wife, and when I ended up in the squadron over in China, he was there, and I flew with him a couple times there, and he was on a mission over Indochina, and it seemed the navigator, you know, navigator was in the navigator's compartment, right in back of the pilot and co-pilot, and they got hit in over Indochina, and he said, the co-pilot or the navigator said that the bullet or thing hit Benny and killed him right away. He was the pilot, and it was on fire, and next thing he remembered, because the above and forward of him was a hatch to go out the top. He said last thing he remembers is him climbing up there and grabbing the handle and pulling it, and the hatch flew off, he remembered. And the next thing he remembered, waking up in the rice paddy in the water. His head wasn't covered, but when he hit the water, it woke him up. You know, it was cold, and the parachute was strung out in back of him, but the rest of the crew all perished in that explosion, and he was the only one. And he had when he got back to the camp, he had a big cut in the side of his head. When he woke up, he looked up and there was a Chinaman standing back of the bushes way off to the distance, come with me. He was hiding back of the bushes, and he didn't know whether to run, grab his gun, or so he picked up his parachute, and he said he went toward him. Of course, there wasn't a heck of a lot he could do, but he just went with him, and the guy, the Chinaman, took him to the French hospital.
The man was treated at the hospital and then released later. Menzel went on to complete more bombing missions, and after one bombing mission, he encountered a Japanese plane.
I was heading from, I was going back home from one mission, and was watching the use of gasoline, That's mighty important, you don't want to quit in the middle. And there was a plane that was heading for us, and it was moving right along, and it got into sight, where we could identify it was. It was Japanese, not a bomber, but a transport. Had the big red ball on it. And I thought about turning around and chasing after it, and firing the cannon several times at it. And then I thought, the gasoline is more important to me than it is to shoot that thing down. So I turned around and kept right on going home.
Gasoline was very important to the pilots during the war, so when pilots landed for gas, they had some time to relax. When Menzel was receiving reports, he encountered a captured Chinese soldier.
Appointed the officer of the day, and I was supposed to take any report that was pertaining to the squadron. And so late one night, we were all playing poker. There was about 10 of us around a big poker table playing poker. And the guy came in and said, the officer of the day is wanted down on the flight line. They captured a enemy on the airfield. So, well, that was me. We got in the sergeant of the day was there. He had a Jeep. We jumped in the Jeep and went down there to see what was going on. And the Chinese had caught I guess he was a Chinaman. He had been out in the middle of the runway, trying to build a fire. He had sticks and all kind of stuff. He was trying to build a fire out in the middle of the runway, and the Chinese had caught him and put him in the sidecar of the motorcycle. And so they brought him over there, and they wanted the officer of the day to know what was going on, and there was a lot of Chinese going around, blah, 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 blah. I didn't know what they were talking about, and finally found somebody that knew what they said. When he was telling me about him, they had him in a sidecar, and he was trying to talk to him, and I guess he was a little, unwound or something. Anyway, and the guard had his rifle, and he'd take him, hit him in the head with the butt of his rifle, and I kept saying, "Don't hit him," blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. I didn't know what they were talking about, and finally the one Chinaman that could speak English came down there, and he said that, well, they were going to take him up to the office and interrogate him to find out what he was doing out there on the runway. They knew that on the other side was part of this mountain. It was about 3,000 feet up above, and you could. They had the Japs were up on that hill someplace, and watching the runway because they were around shooting at them for a while there.
Later, Menzel found out that they had cut the man's hands and head off and buried them. This wasn't his only bad experience in China during the war. He saw how cruel the Chinese forces were firsthand.
Then when the two guys stole a barrel of gasoline, they had it on a yo-yo pole, between them, carried it off the base, and the Chinese caught them at the gate. I don't know why they'd go out of the gate or with a barrel of gasoline, but they did, and they caught them, and they held their trial there. So they cut their hands off, and then they cut their heads off, and buried the bodies, threw the heads in the stream of water, and the dogs later on had found the heads and were down there chewing on them, and they come in, and we heard about it, so we decided we'd go down and to the stream and see what they were really talking about. Sure enough, there were the dogs down there were eating the heads, and they made the Chinese go down there and bury the heads, get the heads buried. That was the end of their gasoline.
After serving in the Air Force for 3 years, Menzel completed the 35 missions necessary to return home and received an Air Medal with 1 star.
One day they said, you got your 35. I didn't keep track of my time, You don't want to, I didn't want to know just exactly how many I had. It was all written on reports, how many missions you had and who had them, where'd you go, and all that kind of good stuff. So they said, you got the 35. You're eligible to leave. So, in fact, they told me that early in the morning, one morning, and I said, well, so long, this is it, I'm leaving. And my navigator and I both had the same amount of time, and so we were in China, but we didn't have an airplane to go back to India to catch our plane back home. So we looked around. There was a ship sitting at the strip that had gasoline. They'd brought barrels of gasoline in. So we asked him, the fellow was flying the plane, if we could ride back if he would take us back to India. When he left there, we said, don't you leave without us in the plane. So we went up, got all our stuff. Well, we threw away a lot of stuff, you don't want to carry it along. And you had to have a parachute. So we checked out a parachute and got down there, and we got on the gas ship and flew back to India. And before we got back to India, the fella arranged for us to go to a transport building and wait and sign up for our next ship leaving for the United States. That next morning, they called and said, you're ready to go. Jumped up, we got on the plane, had a whole load of guys that were coming back. So we all rode back home and back into New York. And Ted, my navigator, went one way and I went another, back to Chicago and home. And that was the end of it. So I decided to get out of the Air Force. And they said, well, we went to the meeting, where they passed out the information. They said, if you got your time in, a certain amount of time, you can get out. Guess what? That hit me just right. I said, that's the end of it. So I went on home. stayed home, went to work. So that was the end of my military business.
Menzel sums up his feelings about the war.
You stop and think about what could have happened and what all did happen. You know, it changes everybody, you know.
We would like to thank my great-uncle Julian Menzel for taking the time to do this interview. This is the first time he has really opened up about it to anyone since the war. I am proud and honored by my great-uncle's service and the service of all the other veterans that served this country. He learned the terrible tragedies of war and how they affected the veterans' lives. My great-uncle traveled all over the world from South America to China. He made many friends and had good times and bad ones with them. We learned that pilots had to complete 35 missions before they could finally get out of the fighting. 35 missions was not an easy feat to obtain due to a lack of gasoline. He set out and achieved his 35 missions when many people didn't even achieve half. Julian played a crucial role in many bombing missions with his piloting. Pilots and all the other troops of the United States Army were effective to the winning of the war. We thank all the soldiers, living and deceased, who fought honorably in the devastating World War II. Without their sacrifice, we wouldn't be living in this land of the free.
The weather's fine for flying, the fog has gone to bed. There's such good visibility, you could see victory ahead.